I want to talk to you today about this idea of community. I'm going to be talking about a community for 6 weeks. I know you're thinking I serve a church whose name is community, but how do we make community broadly, not just in our church? How do we make a true community? What is a true community? What does it take to go from, brokenness and conflict and all the differences between us and top-down solutions and all of that to genuine community? Because that seems to be something we're not very good at. And I'm not particular about who we is. Church people, sure. Community, generally, neighbors, politicians, business people. We're not very good at it. So a guy named Peter Block wrote a book about community, and I'm sort of taking some of his ideas, but turning them into messages and using Bible stories. So that's what I'm doing for 6 weeks. And this week, thinking about how I invite someone into a different kind of a conversation. Not a conversation where I'm telling you what for. Not a conversation where I've got all the answers, all predetermined, but a conversation that you can be part of where your input matters, because that will be part of making community happen. I need first to invite you. So, you're at the Takeout, a ministry of Community United Methodist Church in North Muskegon, Michigan. I'm Jeremy Williams. I'm the pastor at Community, and I love the name of our church. And I really believe that we sort of instinctively in Community Church understand some really important things about being community. We understand that we disagree and still love each other. We understand welcoming people who don't look like ourselves, don't marry like ourselves, don't politic like ourselves, and that's great. We are not as far along the way as we could be. We believe in, we practice, we do community naturally. But let's think about how we can continue to move it forward, to do it better, to be what God has in mind. So here, I want to read to you a very short story out of the book of Acts. So Paul is a guy who goes around starting Christian communities, and usually he goes to the Jewish community where he wants to tell people about Jesus. And his particular target within those Jewish communities is the people who aren't Jews, but who are worshiping God, but they never get the full insider position because they're not actually ethnically Jews, and you have to be one of those to really get the full participation in the covenant as most Jews understood it at the time. He arrives in a new place. Paul arrives with Timothy, maybe with Luke himself, who's the writer of this, and in a city called Philippi in Macedonia. He, listen up to the story. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate by the river, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. Isn't that interesting? We just kind of went to where we thought the people would be. On a Sabbath day, which is a day for praying and worshiping, we went to a place where we thought they would go. Does this mean the Jewish community didn't have a synagogue, or else we would have gone to a synagogue? Maybe. Or it means, the men were hogging the synagogue, acting like they were in charge, and we wanted to go where the other people who weren't welcome in leadership in the synagogue would be? Who were the other people? So we found the prayer meeting down by the river. So we went outside the gate by the river where we supposed there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. Sure enough, it was a group of women gathering for a prayer group because they probably weren't allowed to go in the synagogue. And for multiple reasons. One, they weren't allowed to sit probably on the same level as the men. They had to sit up in the balcony. And two, if they weren't actually Jewish, they wouldn't have been allowed in at all. So we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. I just want you to think about that. If you want to build community, go to where the people are. This is something churches do a terrible job at usually. We don't habitually go where the people are and do what the people are doing. If I want to tell people who already have a background of understanding about God, but have some sort of basic thing keeping them back, I go to where they are. I don't go to the synagogue because that's where all the authority people are. All the Jewish authority people are hanging out there. And they're not interested in me talking about Jesus. They don't want to know. And they don't want to change because things are going their way. And they've got an agenda. So I've got an agenda too. But even though I'm Paul, have an agenda showing up at this Riverside gathering, the first thing I'm going to do is show up at prayer time and join in the prayers. I'm going to be part of it. I'm going to do the local thing. I'm going to do what the people are doing right here. It's like, if you go to North Muskegon, you want to go to the football games in the fall and sit there and prove I'm part of the neighborhood. I'm part of the community. I show up for these kinds of things. I show up for the choir concerts. I do these kinds of things. You make yourself part of it. You show up. And that means making yourself available. And listening. And paying attention. And not just saying, okay, I seem to have arrived in a place where people are gathered for prayer. Let me tell you the truth, and you've all been wrong all this time, and you think Paul started that way? We think of Paul sometimes as an arrogant guy, but no. This is not how you build community, and this is not how you make friends. This is not how you get there. You have to start by surrendering your agenda. We hate that. It's hard to imagine Paul really wanting to surrender his agenda. And maybe he was willing simply to put his agenda on hold for a couple hours. Just to let it hang back. When it's time and when we've been together and I've proven that I'm interested in being here, then you'll ask me, so what are you thinking about? Why'd you come? What do you got to say? Instead, we have a habit of just pushing our agenda forward as if we're the boss and we have the PowerPoint and we have the agenda and we've got the plans and I'm just going to tell you how it is. Well, that's no way to go. It's okay if you're the boss and you pay people to be there. But as Peter Block points out, if you're trying to build community, then you have to give people the freedom to show up or not show up. And it's especially important to know that every time you get together, and this is the same thing at church, every time you get together, you have freedom to show up or not show up. Every time we worship, every time we have Bible study, every time we have a meeting, I'm not paying anybody to show up. Instead, we're trying to make ourselves available. And if someone does show up and worship with us on a Sunday morning, or does show up online and participate, and does show up at a study group or something, then they've done something special. And I need to thank them. And I need to respect them enough to listen up, see what they're saying. I need to pay attention. That's what I need to do. I'm not the boss. I am instead the person trying to create community with people. And that right there means that I don't get to set the agenda. I have to show up and let any agenda that I may have had, that I may still have. Maybe I want to tell people about Jesus like Paul would have. But first, I got to listen to you. In fact, people ask me theological questions once in a while, and as often as not, it's someone I don't even know who's asking me a question on email or asking me a question. I've had a couple of times it was by phone, but by email or something, and they ask me a hard question, and I think I can't talk to you unless you first disclose a little bit about yourself so I know how to talk to you. I need to know what kind of language you're used to, what kind of God talk you've had in the past, and then I understand better how I can talk to you. And I don't need to just push my agenda. First, I have to know you. We have to build up trust. I have to know if I can trust you not to quote me out of context later on and say that, well, that pastor over at Community Church is going to hell for sure because they said that. Well, maybe I said that, but you're taking it all out of context and saying it to somebody else. No. What if we said, I want to get to know you. I'm interested in knowing more about you. Let's get a cup of coffee. I haven't got very far. I'm sorry. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God. Now that means she's not a Jew, but she worships God. So she's a person already who's not fully included. So she showed up with an openness to conversation, with an openness to hear. She hadn't come saying, yeah, if anybody comes and they've got some message about anybody named Jesus, I don't want to hear it. I'm appalled by that, and I say no. She showed up and made herself available. Paul and Timothy, who's with him, make themselves available. And that is the only way we can have conversation. Each of us has to invite the other into a safe place. If conversation can't be safe, then we're not going to get anywhere because we're not going to share. I'm always asking leaders in our church to share ideas with me. I really try not to be the guy who says, this is the way it is. And I seldom do. I hope they don't think I'm just ducking, having to take authority and lead. Because what I'm really trying to do is acknowledge that every person who's in leadership has wisdom and has insight and has experience, all of which need to come together to make the best possible decisions, the best possible ways of saying things and doing things, and the best possible directions to go. And I rely on other people to share that with me so that we can put it together into something better than what I came up with alone. Because usually the idea I show up with is not a bad idea, but it's not the best idea yet. Not until we've talked through it a few times. And I have to be showing up to meetings or whatever, or conversations in parking lots or wherever. I need to show up willing to let go of my ideas. Willing to say, no, you're right. That's a better idea than my idea. I'm changing. Now, how often do you go into a conversation knowing up front you are willing to change your mind? Most of us don't want to change our opinions. We only want to tell our opinions. We don't want to listen and be changed by other people. And that is killing us. It's also killing the church. We really need to open ourselves up and learn to respect and honor what other people are saying, what other people are feeling. I need to see if someone else is feeling threatened, see if someone else is feeling undervalued. Honor that feeling and adjust our conversation accordingly. There's wisdom in this. There's gentle, sure wisdom. So Paul, Lydia, show up. Sure, they have thoughts, they have questions of their own, they have issues, they have things they want to say, and yet they're making room for each other. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. And that opening of the heart is the beginning of any really good conversation. Opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. I just want you to think about conversations that Jesus had. You know, Jesus got into a conversation with a woman who wasn't Jewish, who came to him and said, "Would you heal me?" And he talks back. He says, I don't know why I should. We don't do that. And she comes back with a real smart aleck reply. Well, even the dogs get to eat the crumbs that fall from the children's table. And he says, never have I seen such faith. I'm impressed. And he's allowing himself to be challenged. Jesus allowing himself to be corrected. Maybe he didn't say everything he was thinking right at the beginning. He just gave kind of a quick answer, and she came back at him. And Jesus was good with that. Now, if the Son of God is making himself available for a real conversation again and again and again, then who are we to say, no, I know the agenda of this. I know how this is going to go. I know the outcomes I've chosen. We're going this way. And it's like we're all selling instead of conversing. But conversing is what we need to invite people to. So the bad news is right here I am in front of a camera, and it's one way. You know, I talk to the camera, and the camera just records, and then I edit it a little bit and put the scriptures in and blah, 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 and it goes out to you. But what I really hope is that you will send back your replies and engage me in conversation, knowing I will try to honor and respect and fully include your voice when you're talking. That's really important to me. I hope it's important to you. This openness is where community begins. If we want to be a true community, we don't have to be huge. We don't have to be autocratic. We don't have to run this way or run that way. We have to be open instead to the truth of one another, to true conversation, to love, the mutual respect. I haven't even finished the story of Lydia. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home. And she prevailed on us. Now, that's a very short story. We went to a place, we prayed with some people. She was excited, got all the family baptized, and all the servants probably, and then said, come to my house. And the reason to say, come to my house, it's not that she wants to prove something or get status for having had the apostles over to her house. That's not it at all. She wants to carry on the conversation. She says to herself, I have opened up. The Lord has opened my heart. I want to be open. I want to hear what's coming. Paul and Timothy, they're open to sharing. And they seem to be open and respecting, and they took the time to come here and pray with us and engage with us where we were. Ultimately, that's what's got to happen. We need to invite people to a conversation that is open-ended, that can go on. A conversation that isn't over as soon as I've said my piece. A conversation that's just beginning all the time. Where we get to discover one another and realize we're not the same, we don't agree on everything, and that in no way gets in the way of us having a great conversation. Not about what's for dinner. Not a conversation about doing the laundry and mowing the yard. A conversation about things that matter. A conversation that builds community. Is this God stuff? Oh yeah. Jesus comes to earth so that we can ask questions, and he can ask questions of us. In fact, the whole Christian life is a lifelong engagement with God, where we continue to give and take, where we continue to learn and grow and share. I invite you to that life. I invite you to that conversation. But I really hope that this week, when you go and have conversations with other people, that you will, in fact, invite them to real conversation and open yourself to that and discover God shines through all these other faces and speaks to you. God bless you. Thanks for being here.